On today's Locked On Texan podcast, Cody and I discuss Nick Caserio's press conference. Will there be any moves made at the deadlines? And Nick Caserio is not necessarily looking too far ahead of the season.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes,
I'm your
sir.
Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy, Hickman, and of course, joining me as always is your beat reporter for the Houston Texans around this team every day, Sports Illustrated's own credential media member, Cody Davis.
I'm back throwing up the H.
Back going up the H, not the 504, thank God. If you are new to the Locked On Texans podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And to our returning players from the Himalayas, as always, we thank you for checking us out again as we continue to cover your team every day. For today's episode, Nick Caserio shows his appreciation to DeMeco Ryans. I think that's a relationship in terms of success goes hand in hand. So it's good to hear him show his appreciation. Cody and I would dig into that. Will there be any moves made at the deadlines? We'll discuss that as well, which is something we discussed on Tuesday episode. So kind of circling back to that, we're going to kick it off with Nick Caserio, not necessarily looking too far ahead of the season as this team now sits at 3-3. But before we dive into that, forgot to mention something on Tuesday episode, so I got to mention it now. The 1-year anniversary of the
Lord.
Houston Texans parting ways with their former executive vice president of football operations, your favorite pastor in the city of Houston, former favorite pastor in the city of Houston, Jack Easterby, who came to this franchise back in 2019. As you know, the moment he arrived, there was Brian Gaines issues, there were Bill O'Brien issues, there were following player rumors. There was so much that went into Jack Easterby's time here in Houston, and 3 years later, he was let go by the franchise, which was one of the best decisions in recent history for the Houston Texans. Also, shout out to Baby Caserio, placed fourth in her cross-country meet.
I used to run cross-country. Yes, sir. Back when I was athletic. By the way, participated in the Texans Media Combine a couple days ago. And yeah, John, I think it's safe to say I'm no longer athletic like I used to be.
Go ahead and admit it. But you know what you do now? Instead of being an athlete, you are a reporter. You are a media member. And with that, you had an opportunity to be at the NRG Stadium, as Nick Caserio said, in front of the crowd of many reporters and media members, the press conference. And one of the bigger takeaways was for Houston, that is sitting at 3-3, 500 for the first time, and God knows when. Nick Caserio is not looking too far ahead. What's going on with that, Cody?
Well, first and foremost, let me just say this. It's kind of ironic. 365 days ago, we came on this show and talked about the departure of Jack Easterby, because when you take a look at that One Pacific move, that's part of the reason why we're looking at the Houston Texans in a promising light. Because, John, to your point, ever since Jack Easterby walked inside of NRG Stadium, it has just been turmoil after turmoil after turmoil with that organization. You depart from him, 365 days later, everybody is showing love, support, and their promise, their expectations for this organization. And look, I understand it. I get it. This is a team that's 3-3 as of right now. However, John, we got to go all the way back to the 2019 season, which was the last time the Texans entered the bye week with a winnable record. And a lot of people, including us here on this show, we have talked a lot about what is at stake for the Houston Texans for their final 11 games for the 2023 season, because not only do they have a chance to finish the year and surpass their win total, probably surpass it from when you combine their last win total from 2021 and 2022, there's a possibility that the Texans can win over 7 games for this upcoming season, because not only do you have the coach, not only do you have the players, but at the same time, you have a schedule that is favorable. We already talked about what the remaining games will be for this organization moving forward. However, the one thing that I did love about Nick Caserio, even though a lot of people like us are talking about them finishing the year with a really good record, possibility of them winning this division, a possibility of them making the playoffs, Nick Caserio isn't looking too far ahead. Right now, his mind and his immediate plan is how to get this organization better leading up to their Week 8 match against the Carolina Panthers.
Probably echo a lot of the same sentiments that DeMeco had yesterday. We're in a decent spot. I mean, a lot of work in front of us, long way to go. I mean, 3 wins basically gets you 0 in this league. So, we got a lot of work in front of us. I think the focus this week is trying to clean up some things relative to our team, practice tomorrow, try to, work on some of the areas that we think we can improve, do a little bit of a self-scout, personnel, are we using the players the right way? And then start to think about Carolina. Good football team. I mean, I know what their record is. I mean, we can't do anything about that, but they got a lot of good players. So each week's a challenge. Half the league is 3-3 or 3-2, right? I mean, so nobody's done anything to this point. So, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we haven't done anything. We've earned what we've earned. A lot of work in front of us. So, players done a good job to this point, but 11 games left. So it's a week-to-week endeavor in this league, and that's how we're approaching it. Nothing more, nothing less.
First off, 2 things really quick. One, I think my favorite quote is when he said, at the time, most teams are either 3-3 or 3-2. John, I love that quote because the Houston Texans are in the mix of things. But most importantly, my favorite thing about Nick Caserio in his press conference that we did on yesterday, he doesn't look stressed.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Great takeaway.
He doesn't look stressed. He wasn't rambling on. It's just like a weight was lifted off his shoulders because, look, later on in the show, we're going to talk about him giving a lot of credit to a lot of people, especially DeMeco Ryans, for the turnaround that the Houston Texans have been on throughout this whole entire season. However, he does deserve a lot of that credibility as well because, once again, 365 days ago, the McNairs, they made the decision to depart from Jack Easterby. And as I mentioned, to open up this segment, we are now looking at this team with the possibility to do something special for this season.
Yeah, and I like that he mentioned, of course, around the league, everybody's around 3-3, and this is a great opportunity for the team here in Houston to, clean up some things and improve. I also like that he's looking at Carolina, and of course, nobody necessarily is going to outright and say we're going to play a bad team, but I think for Houston, they're he's one of their leaders, and it's good to hear him say, hey, listen, we still got some things to improve on. And any given Sunday, you can see a team lose. Any given Sunday, you can see a team win. And looking at Carolina, and I'm kind of looking ahead as well, but that is their next immediate opponent. And they're getting some time to prepare and get ready because they win that game. They sit at 4-3. You look at a Houston Texan team that's in a much better position after that week. So not necessarily looking too far ahead, but making sure that they stay on course. And also he mentioned, just getting better here in house and looking at personnel and things like that. To that, and this is something we can look at, maybe next week, but in terms of personnel, another opportunity for Houston to not necessarily just look around the NFL in terms of personnel, but in-house contributions and who can improve on this roster. So, of course, we saw it in the game against the New Orleans Saints. Personnel decisions were made to give Devin Singletary some more carries. And I'm also looking at the personnel decisions that could be made throughout this week and next week on whether or not the coaching staff, general manager Nick Caserio and on down, look at X Hutchinson as a player that they maybe want to get more involved in, maybe within the run. And that was a role that they tried to give to Tank Dell. X Hutchinson was a little bit more effective, in his 2 opportunities, 2 carries for 14 yards. And in what ways can they look at the players that they have on their roster, and in what ways can they maximize their roles and potentials? And so for Nick Caserio, not looking too far ahead doesn't necessarily mean looking at the next matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, and that's like 6 games out, 5 games out. But not looking too far ahead really means still looking at what we have here at home in the NRG Stadium and how can we use this additional time to maximize the potential of the players already on the 53-man roster. And I also love that he gave a shout out to Khalil Davis, one of my favorite players on this team so far on the defensive side of the ball, because he's a baller. He's a guy that goes out there and make plays. And so, to your point, before I wrap it up, he does not look stressed, right?
And he didn't wear the vest either. This might be the first time I'd seen him without the vest.
Didn't wear a vest. He looked like a guy that was, just had a beer before the press conference, kind of cool, calm, and collected. We gave him a grade on yesterday. I think we both kind of improved his grade, just kind of looking at how the things are playing out right now. But I love his approach, man. And no GM is going to come out and say, we're not worried about that. But I do love his approach of not looking too far ahead because he knows that there's still work to be had here at home. But next, outside of home, will there be any moves at the deadline? Cody will get into that because I thought that his response was very interesting. Hey guys, our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire for myself, because I need a running back right now. Every week, we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's peep man on Vinny Iyer and see who he has picked out on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. We're going to look at the wide receiver position. Now, I know you guys may not like the quarterback in Atlanta, but Drake London is starting to show why the Falcons drafted him first among the many talented wide receivers back in the 2022 draft and why he has a hot sleeper in the 2023 fantasy draft, why he was a hot sleeper in the 2023 fantasy draft. London has found his groove in the offense with Desmond Ridder. In the past 2 weeks, he has caught 15 of his 21 targets for 203 yards. He draws another good spot in week 7 against the Buccaneers, who have struggled to contain team's number one wide receivers. Nico Collins should have a good day. But we'll keep looking at Drake London. London is guaranteed to keep bringing the pleasing production with great matchups ahead against the Titans, the Vikings, the Cardinals before a Week 11 bye. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motor Guarantee Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Tanitra Baptiste, Jarvis Davis, Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, much more, of course, is all coming with that package. Plus, you get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who knows these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Cody, the press conference was really juicy. Tuesday show, we talked about whether or not it makes sense for Houston to go out there and improve their roster by looking outside of the franchise. Trade deadline is at the end of the month. I think Houston does have some 14 days away. I think Houston does have some holes that can be filled, and I believe as of right now, they are sitting around $5.5 million in salary cap. And by the way, guys, make sure that you take time out to Follow Texans Cap on Twitter. He does a very great job of breaking down not only contracts, but film breakdown and the whole nine. But when you look at any moves that can be made at the deadline, Nick Caserio feels like blank.
Hey, man, with the trade deadline coming up, how much, if any, has the success that this team had, how much is that going to play into the back of what y'all may or may not do?
Yeah, zero. I mean, we're going to look at our team, figure out is there an opportunity to add a player that we think can help us. If there is, great, we'll pursue it. And if there's not, then we won't. Like, we feel comfortable with the players that are in the building, that are on the team. I'd say we've had to use our depth across positions here, whether it's the offensive line. You know, we've brought players up from the practice squad that we've elevated that have impacted us in the kicking game, like D'Angelo Ross as an example. So, you know, we've talked about this. It's really 1 through 70 or 1 through 69, however many players in the building. So focus on those players. And if there's somebody externally that we think can come in here and really have a defined role and have an impact, then we'll certainly look into that. If there's not, then we won't. And there's always a financial component of this as well. I mean, there's a certain cost associated with the contract that you take on. So how much are you paying for that player? What's the cost? Can you fit them under the cap? I mean, we have, I would say, a pretty good working budget for the duration of the year. So we could take on a certain level of contract, but if it's more than that, then okay, we cut half the team, or you know, have to do a little bunch of cap manipulations, which you just push everything out to future years. It's not a good way to run a team. It's not a good way to run a business. So try to make good decisions, try to identify some players that may or may not be able to help us. It might be on a practice squad, it might be on the street, it might be on a roster. So, I mean, whatever happens at the trade deadline, happens at the trade deadline. I would say over the last couple of weeks, there's been, a handful of trades that have taken place. I mean, they've been basically 6-7 flips or late round picks, so it's really for nothing. So if there's a player that maybe fits that bill, fits that category, we'll look at it. If there's not, then we won't do anything.
You guys just heard the response that Nick Caserio gave to me when I asked him about whether or not the success of the team is going to impact what they're going to do with the trade deadline coming up. However, John, listeners and viewers, I do believe that Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans will explore the trade market and see if they could bring in a player that can actually help, but only if it makes sense financially. Plain and simple, because I look at this from a standpoint, and John, you alluded to this a couple of days ago, and we talked about this similar topic. They're not going to go out there and add somebody that's going to be a quote unquote star caliber player. The best example I can give is when you take a look at the Denver Broncos. They're going to be sellers at the deadline. There's a lot of great players on that roster that they're going to put out there on the trading block. And as right now, Jerry Jeudy is a guy that's going to be on the trade market. And I'm actually expecting him to get moved at the trade deadline. However, I don't expect Coach DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio to go after somebody like Jerry Jeudy, because I think he's going to change too much of the dynamic that the wide receiving core in this offense and this franchise has established, plain and simple. If they do bring in somebody at the deadline, it's going to be somebody that's going to add to their depth, because the one thing that Nick Caserio talked about a lot, whether it was my question or whether it was other questions about other players, i.e. like a Khalil Davis, he talked a lot about this team having a lot of depth. And we all know, especially due to the injuries, that the Texans in 2023, it might be in their best interest to make sure you have a lot of depth at several positions, because you never know what can happen. Or you could just have quality complementary guys that can go out there and execute what you want to do, that's going to put you in a best situation to succeed.
Or you could explore the market and see if there's a team out there that is willing to move on from a running back that for his career,
my goodness, don't do it.
Rushes for 4.6 yards per carry, has before he landed at this new team, has 4 1,000-yard seasons in a row. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about calling up the New York Jets.
No.
And figuring out, hey, y'all not using him. He's not working out for y'all right now. How does a late round pick sound for Dalvin Cook?
So now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I say that because, listen, financially, I think whatever the Jets are paying him right now, and I can't remember the exact number. And I thought when he signed with the New York Jets, I thought that was kind of weird, considering they also had Breece Hall. But if they traded for him, I don't think it'd be a financial hit. I also will look at this as a situation for both sides to get an opportunity to see moving forward whether or not this is a situation that works best for both parties. You know, for the Texans, okay, are you going to play well after we trade for you? And if so, how are you going to look in our system under Bobby Slowick, and would it make sense for us to bring you back next year? For Dalvin Cook, I'm pretty sure he still wants to prove whether or not he could be a top-ish running back in the NFL. But offensively, we know that this team is driven by the offense. We know that this team is not only driven by the offense, but is driven by the passing game. And we can't sit here on this show week in and week out through 6 weeks now and talk about, well, we got to get the running game going, use the pass to open up the run. And we can't talk about how minimum the running game has been for the Houston Texans on most occasions and not look to upgrade that position. And I think the New York Jets is a team that could be selling players. Carl Lawson is a guy at DN who, you know, I would look at beefing up the defensive line, but more specifically the D tackle spot. I wouldn't be mad if Houston went out there and looked at a Danielle Hunter and moved on from Jerry Hughes. But I also look at Jerry Hughes as a guy that his veteran leadership means something, and he's on his last year of his deal. Hometown man. So maybe they wouldn't be so eager to move on from him. He's decent in his role, even though that speed, he's lost a step a little bit. But I would implore Houston to call the Jets about Dalvin Cook. I would. Also, the Denver Broncos. If y'all having a yard sale like y'all should be having a yard sale, I don't know y'all in Colorado. We don't want no smoke. We don't want no Zai. We don't want none of that. But we would like one of those running backs that have ran well for the Denver Broncos. Giving Houston an upgrade at the running back room, right? You add another player, a dynamic player to that running back room could potentially open up this offense. So y'all might kill me, Cody, you might kill me, but I wouldn't be upset if Houston at the trade deadline looked at those two teams, those two franchises, and said, you got a player that either A, will probably like to get out of his situation in the New York Jets, or you got a franchise over here that is probably about to burn it all down. I'm going to make a call and see what I can offer. Late round pick, give me that player. Let's move forward. Let's upgrade our offense.
I got a couple issues with this. First and foremost, what are you going to do with Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce? And how are you going to have a running back? How are you going to have a running back room with three potential backs? Like how are you going to split up the
entire
carries?
league? How many teams have a number one running back in the NFL?
None, but
you got CMC in San Fran.
Yeah, you got CMC. You got
not even Bijan in Atlanta because Tyler Algier gets about 10 to 12 carries a game.
Off the top of my head, there's two, because you can also mention Derrick Henry in Tennessee.
Derrick Henry.
So that's two. But what team do you know that has not one, not two, but three quality running backs?
All
at the same
based
time.
Off of what we've seen so far this season, can we say that Houston has, if they add one of those running backs, will it be three quality running backs? The running attack for Houston has been nearly non-existent. So why not upgrade that to add to your offense that has put up 30 points, that's put up scoring points? Why not add that?
I understand.
What are we doing?
I understand that Dameon Pierce is going through a sophomore slump. Even offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick talked about it last week, how they're still trying to figure out getting accustomed to the rushing attack under him. I get all that. I understand it. We're not about to go into the offensive line was hurt and all this other stuff. However, even though Dameon Pierce is having himself, I'm going to just go ahead and say it, a terrible season at this point, he is still a promising running back that's young and has a lot of thread on the tire. And we saw Sunday against
when is the trade deadline?
14 days. It's Halloween night, Tuesday, October 31st. And we saw Sunday how you split the reps with Devin Singletary, and look what you was able to do with your backfield with the rushing attack. So it was arguably, if not the best of the season.
Why would I make Why would I trade for a running back?
It doesn't make sense because look,
in 2 weeks, the Houston Texans take on the Carolina Panthers. Right? 2 days later, it's the trade deadline. Houston could potentially be sitting at 4-3. Now, depending on what happens during this bye week and that following week, they could either inch up to be a number one or a half a game, or they could get that 7th wild card spot. The 7 spots now. So, and because they're a half a game out right now. So there's a potential that Houston could either secure as of right now, if the season stopped at that point, they could be the front runners for the division or be right there in the mix, because they're right there in the mix right now for that final wild card spot. You're telling me that if I'm a general manager of a team that I desperately he still needs to see this team improve based off of his history as general manager, you want to see this team make the playoffs, you want to see this team make a push. You're telling me that it doesn't make sense to figure out how can I improve offensively when I can see about Dalvin Cook or one of those running backs in Denver because of based off what we've had so far? What is the Achilles heel for this offense?
But
it hasn't necessarily been the offensive line because, I mean, even with the injuries, they've played decent enough, 3 games with no sacks. The wide receivers at times have shown up. Nico Collins has shown up. Dalton Schultz starting to show up. It's been the running room. Why not upgrade it?
But that because at least in my opinion, there's other positions that you can go out and add depth to the room, i.e. the defensive line unit. Like they definitely
Hunter in Minnesota. I think
I would rather them give up a 6th, 7th, or whatever it would take in order to get Hunter than bringing in Dalvin Cook, who by the way is scheduled to make at least guaranteed $5.8 million. I understand majority of that is probably going to be worked out with the New York Jets. Whoop. You do what you got to do with the financial standpoint. But to me, I just think there might be other positions of need that you can do to help this team in the long term. I.e., you mentioned the offensive line. We still have a vacancy at left guard, even though Titus Howard has been doing okay at that. I just don't think
the depth is there for the O-line. What other positions on this team is struggling as much as the running back position?
But that's the thing, John. The only reason why majority of the struggles that we've seen in the rushing attack is due to whatever is going on with Dameon Pierce.
Now, so upgrade the problem.
So what are you going to do with D? You can't play all 3 running backs. That's what I'm saying.
Are we trying to win games, or are we trying to appease players in the
So I'm asking you. You bring in Dalvin Cook. How are you going to split the carries? How are you going to utilize all 3 of those running backs? That's what I'm trying to figure. I'm trying to make this make sense because, like I mentioned,
as a head coach,
somebody
coordinator. I'm putting the best players out on the field.
You're right, and that goes back to what we talked about last week. Just split the reps with Devin Singletary, who did a phenomenal job on Sunday. He was arguably, I'm not going to say the best running back because Alvin Kamara still did his thing, but he was by far the 2nd best running back on the field Sunday. And I think that's what they're going to do moving forward. I just don't see if they make a move at the trade deadline, it's going to be to add depth, because if Dalvin Cook get traded from the New York Jets, they're going to trade him to a team where he can go somewhere and still establish himself as running back number 1 and as arguably one of the top running backs in the league. If he comes here to Houston, that's not going to happen.
You're telling me Dalvin Cook ain't better than what Houston has right now?
I'm not saying that Dalvin Cook isn't better than what the Texans have right now. I'm just saying if you bring in Dalvin Cook, one is going to change up the dynamic of what the Houston Texans has already found in that game against the Saints. But 2, and most importantly, he is not going to be in a position. They're not going to feature him as RB1.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Now listen, I'm about winning games and putting the best players out on the field.
And you don't think so? You think so? Really quick, I just want to know.
Your comment was before you said when they split carries, Devin Singletary was good.
Yeah, on Sunday he was.
Okay, that's
coming off a week, but that's coming off a week where he didn't get no type of carries. You call for him to get carries. Both of them had 13 carries, and look what happened. And like you mentioned, John, to your point, not too many teams have RB number ones. I get that. I understand it. But I just don't see a world where the Texans bring in Dalvin Cook and you literally have 3 running backs that you really like. It just doesn't make sense to me. If the Texans go out there and make a move, one, as what Nick Caserio said, financial sense, but 2, and most importantly, I think it's just going to all determine adding depth to certain positions. And as of right now, I don't see a move, i.e. a Dalvin Cook's move, being that for the Texans right now. I just don't see it.
Do you ever feel like your brain is just getting in its own way? Don't feel bad. We've all been there. I've been there. And at times with a baby on the way, I still feel like sometimes I just can't get out of my own way because my brain just won't cut off. I keep thinking. And sometimes I try to figure out what should I do? What's good for me? And sometimes I can't, honestly. But guys, honestly, BetterHelp with this therapy, it helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of working against yourself. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. So do me a favor. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. I hope you guys enjoy Cody and I back and forth.
I'm still appalled, man.
That's one thing that we love to get into. If you ever listen to our rundown days, which was a long time ago now, right? But Cody, Nick Caserio showed appreciation to DeMeco Ryans, his head coach, and I'm pretty sure that he's like, DeMeco, thank you. Thank you so much. But those two men have worked well together. They constantly kind of glowingly talk about their working relationship and how they bounce ideas off of one another. So the bye week was a perfect opportunity for the general manager, and I believe at some point we will hear from DeMeco Ryans to do the same, but just to kind of show that love and give appreciation, to his head coach.
Yes, sir. First and foremost, shout out to the GOAT, John McClain. He was the very first one to ask the question during Nick Caserio's press conference on yesterday. And he asked, how did he feel about the success that he is experiencing so far this year with the players that he signed throughout free agency, like a Devin Singletary, like a Dalton Schultz, like a Robert Woods. And not only that, when you take a look at the players that he drafted, i.e. CJ Will, we can go on and on. But most importantly, the people that he hired, i.e. DeMeco Ryans, he was asked about, just how much credit does he take for the success? And Nick Caserio deflected all of the success to everybody throughout this organization, to ownership, to the scouting department, to, of course, the players who was going out there on the field every single Sunday, showcasing what they can do, especially in the run, especially somebody like Devin Singletary, when you give him an opportunity to go out there and have, equal snap like Damian Pierce, he goes out there and improve your rushing attack to prove that it doesn't make sense to go out there and make a trade for a running back. I just want to throw that out there. But in all honesty, Nick Caserio showed his appreciation to everybody who has helped make this season a success so far, but he especially went out his way to show his love, appreciation, his admiration for head coach DeMeco Ryans.
I think DeMeco and the coaching staff deserve a tremendous amount of credit for, what we've done where we are. I mean, I'd say just specifically DeMeco. I mean, he's everything that I think we hoped and thought he would be. I mean, as good of a coach he is, he's a better person and a human being. Players love playing for him. Players want to be here. I think there's a lot of other people that, certainly deserve credit for the performance of the players and, what they've done to this point. Yeah, outstanding. Any superlative that you have, applies to him. And I said it earlier, as great of a coach as he is, he's even a better person and a human being. I think his consistency, his sincerity on a day-to-day basis is real. His energy is real. He probably wishes he could still play. But that, I would say, emotion, that juice, that permeates the building, and the players feel that, and it's real. It's not as if it's made up, and he's very consistent. I mean, we were 0-2, and his mindset and message to the team wasn't any different than when we started the season. And the message to the team yesterday that we're 3-3 was, you know what, it's nice to win, but there's a lot of things that we can do better. And that's the truth. So I think he tells the truth. He keeps it real. I think the players respect him. It's been outstanding. I have a lot of respect, appreciation, admiration for him. I mean, it's only grown over these last, however months that, we've been together. And anything that I can do to support him, then I'm going to be there for him.
I just wanted to highlight that as one of the top takeaways from Nick Caserio's press conference, because we opened up the show joking how he doesn't look stressed. He actually looks happy. He actually looks like, he's on to something special. I just wanted to highlight that, his relationship with Coach DeMeco Ryans, because that's something that Nick Caserio, whether his wrongdoings or not, whether bad coaching hires or not, or whether whatever the case might be, that's something he has not had throughout his 3-year tenure as the general manager for this organization. And you can tell that it's genuine. And not only that, you can tell that both of those guys have a strong working relationship with. And the one thing, every time I look back at the coaching searches that Nick Caserio had, when I look at how him and DeMeco Ryans started working together and what they have built so far, 7 weeks into the season. The one thing that I always go back to is what Nick Caserio said. I believe it was right after they departed from David Culley and right before they started the search where they randomly got Lovie Smith. He said one of the things that he wants to do is find a head coach where they can build sustainable success. Nick Caserio, you've done a tremendous job in hiring Coach DeMeco Ryans, and as of right now, both of you guys are on the verge of building sustainable success here in the city of Houston. Keep doing your thing, man. And one last thing. Don't listen to John for advice on what position you need to upgrade by the trade. No, I'm just playing. But kudos to Nick Caserio, man. There was a lot more I really want to get into in terms of this press conference, especially the things that he had to say about CJ Stroud. John, you and I will touch on that for tomorrow's show, because we have a very fun and interesting topic that I do want to talk about for tomorrow's show in terms of CJ and the former franchise quarterback that used to be here. But Nick Caserio had a phenomenal press conference, man. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much he tried to downplay it. Him, this team, DeMeco, the players, they're on to something special.
Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Had a great fun show today. The energy was there, and the back and forth was probably my favorite part. So make sure that you guys continue to listen throughout the week as we continue to cover your team every day.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.